I work for Cascadia Wildlands, and I know a lot of you. Thank you all for being a part of our fourth and last WildChat of the month of April. These WildChat programs have been a project that we developed out of the need for building community and continuing to do our important conservation work during the COVID-19 pandemic. And these have been going for about a month. This is our fourth one, and we're excited to be bringing this mix of deep dives into our campaigns and also workshops and skill building opportunities to our community. So each WildChat is different, and today's is on Thurston Hills and the Thurston Hills Timber Sale, and it is a workshop. And so as part of this, we're going to actually be doing a deep dive into some skills in phone banking, which is a tactic that we use for social change. So we're going to have three amazing organizers join us to kind of delve into some of these topics today. But before I introduce the three of them and we really get kicking into the program, I want to just give a little bit of background on the Thurston Hills Timber Sale, because this is kind of a storied and it's kind of a complicated timber sale that has been going on for a number of years now. So good to get on the same page about what the heck we're talking about. So the Thurston Hills Timber Sale is an 105-acre clear-cut proposal, and it's in Springfield, right off, it's actually in the Springfield city limits, right off of Main Street or the 126 and the off-road of 79th Street. So on this map that you can see right here, you can see the 126, the 79th Street that Dylan's highlighting with the mouse. There's also that pink area that's kind of highlighted, or that's outlined on the left, the pink. To the left of that, Dylan, yeah, that box to the left is where the Thurston Hills natural area is. And then the orange, everything in the orange boxes is where the Thurston Hills timber sale proposal is. So what we have is BLM land in the orange, and then on the pink is this beautiful Thurston Hills natural area that the city of Springfield has put a lot of money, a lot of volunteer time, and a lot of planning into developing for conservation and for recreation purposes. So that Thurston Hills natural area is home to a really beautiful mountain biking network, as well as some really nice forests with native plant communities and just a little slice of backyard Springfield beautiful forest. And so this Thurston Hills timber sale proposal comes out of the Bureau of Land Management, and it is a clear-cut proposal, although they call it a regeneration harvest, as you can see on this map. And it was originally actually introduced in 2018 in June, which was obviously a number of years ago now. And it was introduced in conjunction with a recreation project that was meant to just bring more biking trails in that new timber sale area. So the Bureau of Land Management decided to also introduce this timber sale in conjunction with the recreation proposals to build the trails. And obviously, that was met with a lot of community opposition. So in the time after the Bureau of Land Management's introduction of the sale, Cascadia Wildlands worked with conservation partners and Thurston area neighbors to organize myriad different tactics, including public hikes, town hall meetings, using door-to-door canvassing, getting to know our neighbors, and filing a legal challenge ultimately to the Thurston Hills sale. So there was pretty significant community opposition, a lot of that coming from people who live locally very close to the timber sale, since this is a neighborhood sale. And ultimately in September of 2019, Judge McShane of Oregon's District Court ruled in favor of Cascadia Wildlands and our co-plaintiff Oregon Wild, and determined that the Thurston Hills timber sale was actually illegal. And so that halted the timber sale completely. And the reasons why the judge determined that the sale was illegal was twofold. One, because of the damage that it would do to the recreation area that it intended to create. And two, which is most concerningly, is the fire hazard that a 100-acre clear cut would create for neighborhood residents. and that fire hazard the BLM itself acknowledged. So the judge determined that the Bureau of Land Management needed to adequately disclose those impacts in its environmental impact statement, or its environmental assessment in this case. And so, doing as many naughty and thoughtless, careless agencies do, the Bureau of Land Management, instead of just dropping this proposal and letting it be, they reintroduced the proposal in February of this year in essentially the same exact form, with very few modifications, except for the addendum of some detailed explanation of just how much this sale would impact neighbors in terms of fire hazard and fire risk. So that's where we're at right now, is we're looking at the reintroduction of this sale after years of community resistance. And I want to say that that included the resistance of some elected officials, most namely Representative DeFazio, who early on wrote a letter in opposition to this timber sale. So right now, the Bureau of Land Management has not yet issued its final decision on the timber sale, but it has issued its renewed environmental assessment. So we're essentially just awaiting what we expect to be another decision that says we are going to move forward with clear cutting this area. And so this issue is extremely relevant to the work that we do in forest defense, but also the work that we do in the overlaps between the community impacts and social impacts and environmental destruction. And it's also of special concern right now during COVID-19, as a lot of these industrial extractive practices are hastened along, and even though many of us are dealing with primary emergencies. So we're worried that there might be some rushed logging in the Thurston Hills, and that this project could be hurried through, which is why we have a renewed focus on opposing the sale as a community. So that is kind of the background in a nutshell of why we're here today. Please feel free to use the chat feature if you have pressing questions or clarifications. We're going to try to save some time. This is a workshop, so there's going to be lots of time for discussion during this. But without much further ado, I want to introduce Cabria. Cabria is here as a Thurston area neighbor, and also as a longtime activist, a volunteer with Cascadia Wildlands, and a total adamant, passionate wolf lover, and just a really inspiring member of our community. She's advocated for a long time on protecting the Thurston Hills. So Cabria, I just wanted to bring you in and ask you if you could tell us, why are you involved in this issue as a Thurston area neighbor?
Thanks, Sam. Well, like you said, like the judge ruled McShane not too long ago, this clear cut would significantly impact the community because of the fire risk that it poses, not to mention other things that residents are concerned about, like the risk of mudslides, etc., how a mudslide would affect traffic on the Highway 26 area, but also the effect on the recreational area. It's a beautiful area. It's really, a lot of Springfieldians are quite proud of it. It's really a gem, and so those two reasons right there. I live in the Thurston Hills. I'm 4 streets down from the natural area, and I'm 8 streets down from 79th Street, which is the access point of the clear cut. So I'm really close, and I wish I could have done this in my backyard so that you could see the Thurston Hills behind me, but those woods are right behind my house. I see them out of all of my windows. And so when you think about the increased fire risk, which is always something that we're concerned about. Before this even came up, we are always so concerned about fire risk in this area because we're in the woods. But when you think about that, it's really scary.
Thank you, Cabria, and thank you for clarifying too where you live. I think it's good for folks. I wish that we had a map too, or that you were in your backyard as well. Because it really is. It's really shocking to see just how close folks do live to this timber sale. It's really
Right.
nestled in and amongst the community.
Well, and when you're talking about forest fire, it's the forest is one big continuous unit. You know, that it's not just a tree. And so, and when you're talking about fire, and we've seen how fire just goes when you have these wildfires, it's really scary. To give perspective for those of you that have been to the natural area and gone across the ridge line, which is above the Mossy Maple Trail, where it connects over to the Oak Savanna. That ridge line is just above my house. I've tried to figure out whereabouts on the ridge line I would be, but I'm really not far down from that trail.
Yeah, and I encourage everyone to go take a look and actually see that place if you have an opportunity. It is just truly, especially as the quarantine lifts and we're able to kind of get outside more, it's a really beautiful spot. Cabria, I wanted to shift into asking you a little bit about some of the messages that work and don't work for neighbors in the Springfield area, since the focus of this discussion is on phone banking and how we can best communicate on these topics. What's been your experience with messaging this to your community?
Surprisingly, it hasn't been a hard sell. I have a neighbor that's a logger that lives a couple doors down, and he doesn't want to clear cut in his backyard. And so that was surprising for me, is that a lot of folks, I haven't talked to anybody that doesn't oppose this. There's a lot of, it's an emotionally packed thing. There's a lot of sentimental reasons. And so it's not hard to convince people of why it shouldn't happen. Like I said, the natural area is really a gem. Springfieldians are proud of it. I've talked to people who even live, I'd say 15 minutes that way in the flats, and they're going, I don't want this in my backyard. This is my natural area. So, there's a huge emotional factor in just appealing to that, especially for those people that are so far removed, is really important. But fire risk is a big one. I've been surprised talking to neighbors who are aware of the increased fire risk with these plantation harvests. I've been actually surprised they're doing the reading. They're reading the op-eds in the various newspapers. So that is tremendous. But there's a lot of people that still don't understand or haven't made that connection between what is it about the plantation harvest that increases the fire risk. A lot of folks that I've talked to just think, oh, well, sure, you're going to take down a bunch of trees. We're going to have kindling for a little bit, and that could go up in flames. But when you start talking about the risks with the plantation harvest, how the trees are grown close together, how the soil is so much drier, the lack of understory, they're genetically modified generally so that they grow faster and suck up a lot more water. When you start talking about, no, it's not the trees that we're cutting down that pose the fire risk, it's actually the trees that they're going to be planting, that's going to significantly increase the risk of having a fire that burns hotter and is going to be way more difficult to contain than if it was in a natural setting, a natural forest.
Absolutely, and that has been one of our key messaging points, is the fire safety issue, which unfortunately is so difficult for a lot of folks to really comprehend. But I think the way that you just explained it is really, really well, really well put. I also want to know, what do you think what are some of the common kind of disagreements that you might hear from neighbors, or maybe like questions or areas of concern in maybe potentially supporting the sale, if you hear any of that?
Well, if I can go back to our meeting with the Springfield mayor, which was over a year ago now, can I talk about that?
Please.
I think that was a perfect example of that makes me want to hit myself in the head, you know, because she goes, sure, we like our trees, and that is really what we're up against, is the people that are like, oh, sure, you like your trees, they're pretty. We like the birds, but they'll come back. Those are some of the common, what are you going to call them? Misunderstandings? I don't know, dismissals, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then I guess, talking to people that say, but it's a renewable resource, you know, and those are the things I hear, but they tend to be from people that are pretty far away from this community in what we call Thurston or East Springfield. everybody I've talked to here in Thurston opposes it. I think it's really easy to dismiss it for people like our mayor, unfortunately, who live far off in Q Street, and they have no value in trees other than a renewable resource that might bring money to the economy. And one of the biggest things, I guess, is not so much I'm not finding so much support for this timber sale, but roadblocks in terms of, yeah, but there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. And so I think making that more accessible for community members. I don't know if you remember, but when I tried to submit my comment, the email address that was on the BLM's website was missing important information. And so I worked on it for about an hour, getting my comments bounced back before I actually got them through. And I did email somebody directly at the BLM who's like, oh, geez, we'll have to look into that. But that sort of thing is how can we make it easier for people that think that this is hopeless, that there's nothing they can do? How can we make it more accessible and easier for them to speak up?
That is such an important point, and it also ties in beautifully with the reason that we're here today. That's been a theme in so much of our work on timber sales, has just been the mass confusion and the
Right.
difficulty to access these documents. So thank you for naming that. And we are actually going to be talking through some of those kind of frequently asked questions or rebuttals or whatever you want to call them during the workshop portion. So I think that you'll have a lot of really great input to share during that part too. But for now, I have just one final question with you in the last minute we have during this interview portion. And that is, if you have, we call it like the elevator pitch, or just like the one sentence, the quick, like, why should we protect Thurston Hills? What's your end it all response right there?
We don't have time for me to go into the story, but I would go into the stories that my husband's been telling me, because we literally live right here next door to the house he grew up in since the 70s. And so I can speak of stories before all of this was developed, when you could literally walk up to all of these places. And again, that emotional appeal, I think is really strong. And so if you can appeal to people and maybe think them, or get them to consider what it would be like for that to happen in their backyard, and talk about the history of a place, the meaning of a place, the I don't know, the value of having this place that's been restored, where we're starting to see native wildlife come back. We're starting to see native wildflowers come back, and then just reminding people that you're a person, your family lives here. And even if it's not their community, imagine if it was their backyard. Imagine if it was their family. Imagine if it was all of these neighbors, whose homes and livelihood, I guess, is at risk with this clear cut when it comes to the fire risk.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is pretty motivating and really wonderful to hear from you. So thanks. Thanks for all the work that you've done on this too. We're going to stop this sale, y'all. We're not going to let this clear cut happen. Round 2, here we go. So I want to pivot from there into, we're going to stop this sale, right, folks? How are we going to do it? Let's talk about the tools in our toolbox. So I want to now introduce our second 2 panelists, who are kind of back to back. So I'm going to introduce them at the same time. Courtney Kaltenbach and Abby, your last name just isn't in front of me anymore. Gravett. Did I say it right? Awesome.
Yeah.
And these 2 are really amazing youth organizers with the University of Oregon's Climate Justice League. They're both leaders in the Forest Defense Working Group, and have been involved in a lot of the timber sale work that Cascadia Wildlands has been doing over the years. They describe themselves as passionate and concerned, and also organized, which I definitely and wholeheartedly agree with from seeing their work in the time that I worked with them. And both of them organized with Climate Justice League a pretty robust campaign to assist and support the work that Cascadia Wildlands, Oregon Wild, Cabria, and local neighbors, and a number of other community organizers were doing. So super wonderful to have you all here. to talk about the 101s of phone banking. We can go ahead and go to the next slide because I'm going to bring in Abby just to talk about what is the tactic of phone banking and why do we do it?
Yeah, thank you. So just in terms of, I know you'd mentioned earlier canvassing, and then phone banking is kind of the virtual way to do that canvassing that we would like to do generally, but obviously in this climate we can't do. So just the first point is that you're covering such a large amount of people, more than you'd be able to cover if you were going door to door, knocking, having to drive around areas that are kind of spread out. We're able to really get a large group of people in contact with the information that we have to say and in contact with our petition, and just getting behind this issue and doing it in much less time. It's also, the next point is that it's just less invasive than going to a house for both parties. You're not having to be in somebody's personal space, and you're also, it's a lot easier for people over the phone to do that kind of volunteer work other than getting out in the field. You're also able to volunteer on an issue that you're passionate about. We heard from Cabria a lot of passion, and I know a lot of other people here have that passion about saving local wildlands and saving that area for recreation and just for safety issues. So this is a really easy way to get out and volunteer in this time that we think it's really hard to get engaged, but this is a really good way to get engaged. We're also able to provide that information that we have. So it's really hard for the public to get information, get in contact with people that have the information. So through this phone banking, we're able to bring the information to them, hopefully make that a little bit easier to get people on board, get people informed, because that's the most important part of this to me, is getting people informed, because I wouldn't know about it if it wasn't for Climate Justice League and Sam and Cascadia's work. And then we're able to learn a little bit about the audience, about how people feel about this issue. Cabria definitely gave us a lot of insight, but with a large amount of people that we'll be able to contact, we're going to really see and record information on how people feel about the timber sale, how people feel about, petition around it and support and against it. And then just the last point is that we're able to persuade the public, hopefully, to the feelings that we have about this land, and get people on board, which would be awesome.
Awesome. Those are some really good reasons. And I think that you mentioned just, during how useful this approach is, especially right now during COVID. And I think that as organizers, we're really looking for ways to connect with our community. And this is just a really, really good way to do that. And I really like the last point you made, persuading folks to take action. That's so, so necessary, especially as we all feel so kind of lost for what to do next during this strange time. So my next question for you is, okay, we're sold, we like this tactic, we want to do it. How do we do it? Give us some tips and tricks.
Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to say is just for ease of phone banking in general, is just to communicate well with people, us who are going to be running it, to know who's there, because that's really important, is having people sign up but then follow through on the day of the event. Because the way that we're going to get this is because we've got so many numbers to call, the amount of people there at the event will be really important for us. And then just like going into it, keep a positive mindset. I know it's sometimes really stressful to talk to people who you don't know on the phone, but they're strangers, you don't know them, you probably won't see them again. So just keep that positive mindset, and if something goes badly, try not to freak out, but also let it go, move on to the next call. That's a different person with a different mindset as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Another point is, which Cabria brought up, is that this sale has a big emotional connection to it for people. And even though you might not live near the sale, I know I don't live near the sale, but I still have a lot of really impactful memories about being in nature and being living near natural areas. So that's super important to bring with you, is just connect and engage with people on that front of sharing the love for the natural land and knowing that connection, and just be yourself. Try not to come up with different personas or something, because you're really going to sell it with what you have inside. And then remember to listen to people. I know our point is to get it across, but people will feel a lot more open and engaged with you if you're really just listening to them and what they have to say, because I'm sure a lot of people do have something to say about the sale. They have heard about it before. So make sure to listen. And then also that brings me to the next point, which is to record accurate and honest data. So on the spreadsheet, we will have places to whether they're interested, whether they are going to sign the petition, whether they have, and just make sure that that data, it might not always be positive. Somebody might not always be engaged with the material, but make sure to have that accurate data, even if it's not positive or towards our cause, because that'll really give us an accurate sense of what's going on. And then I would just say to stay away from politics. This clear cut, depending on like rural, urban, where you are, it could be a very polarizing topic. And then politics will just polarize it even more, because a lot of times those lines align with each other. So just stay away from politics if you can. And then just relax and ask us questions. We'll be here on the day of the call if you decide to join us. And just, you know, don't be afraid to ask. That's all I have.
Thank you, Abby. That was super, super helpful. And what Abby just referenced is a call-in day that we haven't quite mentioned fully yet, but we will announce the details up at the end. We are going to do some collective phone banking to follow up with this phone banking workshop so that you can put your skills to use. And as Abby said, there's going to be some experienced phone bankers there to help guide you along the way. But these are great tips and tricks, and I especially like the ones about relaxing. And one that has always made me feel really good is when someone told me that I have permission to say, I don't know. And I love that phrase and use it all the time. So I think it's a great humanizer too. So thank you, Abby, for that wisdom. Courtney, I want to bring you in for the next piece. So we've got our whys and we've got our tips and tricks. Could you talk a little bit about how we can apply the phone banking to the campaign of Thurston Hills?
Yes, definitely can do that. I think the big thing that we need to focus on is the reason that we decided to phone bank and why we decided on this tactic. And the main reasons are we want to educate the people in this area. The BLM doesn't have to tell people when they're going to come in and do a sale like this. And so what we're trying to do is make up for that, because people have a right to know when their risk of fire is going to be increased drastically. And then the second thing we're doing is mobilizing. And Cabria touched on this, is we're giving simple ways for people to be involved. And so that's what we're doing with forwarding people to the petition. And then later on, we're going to be asking people to call politicians as well. The next thing that we want to focus on when we're thinking about Thurston Hills is who is our audience when we're calling. So the people that we particularly are calling for this phone banking size is going to be people on the Cascadia listserv. And so these are people that are generally supporting conservation. So we don't have to be too concerned about people being super against what we have to say, but at the same time, it's really good to be educated about timber sales and fire danger and things like that. But just to let you know, when I was doing some phone banking, I called someone, and I'm originally from New Mexico, and so my phone number has New Mexico on it. And he said, "Why the hell are you calling me, New Mexico? Are you a Republican?" And he was this just spitfire Democrat that had did not want to be called by a Republican. But once I said I was from Cascadia, he was so interested in what I had to say. And he actually told me that he's friends with Peter DeFazio and he was going to text him. So I think experiences like this are something to keep in mind. And what Cabria has said, the thing is, the fact of the matter is that clear cuts near residential areas are not great, and people can agree across that around the board. So we're just conveying that. And then that gets back to our main point to convey when we're calling, and that is that this sale is going to majorly increase fire danger amidst the COVID crisis. And I'm going to be touching on why that's so bad some more, but Sam just even released an article in the Register Guard about how the BLM is continuing with their logging projects, even though timber mills aren't even open. So these logs are getting wasted, and there's no reason for them to be doing this. So that's something that we can also include in our message, because it's really prevalent to the time. People know that we're in a pandemic, and it's smart to bring it up and mention how this issue, this ecological issue, the relationship it has to COVID crisis.
That is so useful and really, really, really good angle to kind of think of this from. I think that you're totally right that there is a general concern during this time, and that is a really important point to bring up when we're dealing with connecting with our community. I want to ask now, what are the specific messages that you think work? You mentioned COVID, kind of referencing COVID and building off of the need to pivot for more healthy forest practices. What else is working for you right now?
Yes, so something that was shared with me that I found really interesting is that people in Oregon have polled to be against corporations across the political board. So both left and the right, both are against against corporations. So if you always include that this project is a corporate overreach on public lands, that always polls really, really well. I think what's also really important is kind of what Cabria talked about, is educating around wildfires and about how timber plantations really increase wildfire risk. So we're really trying to fix that misinformation. So clear cuts are less resilient to climate change and more prone to uncharacteristically severe wildfire. Another thing that's been really common in the media is this focus that the Trump administration is pushing past environmental regulations and laws amidst this COVID crisis. And we're seeing this across the board. We're seeing this with pipeline work, with extractive coal things. And so what we're trying to do is include this narrative with what we're saying. So this is like the federal government is also pushing towards bad extractive practices right now during this crisis, and we need to make sure that our local community is not impacted, and protect them as much as possible so that like we do not get this awful cut amidst this crisis that's going to increase wildfire right in time for wildfire season. And then another one that's really good is logging forest does not protect communities from fire, and it emits large amounts of carbon pollution. So we can always include the climate argument, and Abby and I are from Climate Justice League, so we always like to tie in forest defense to the climate conversation because they are one and the same. And so it is good to include that as well. And then the last thing that I want to focus on is this simple equation that I have at the bottom of the slide, and it says wildfire smoke plus COVID plus having to social distance while evacuating equals bad, in all caps. And so like this is the main thing, like this is a no-no, like it's very basic. And if like the government can't realize that, it's really sad. And so we're just trying to convey that message overall.
Wow, I totally agree. And I'm feeling very persuaded again, like just newly fired up after hearing these talking points. Thank you. And thank you for highlighting the interconnectedness between forest defense and climate defense. That's so, so important and key. So we're going to get into the workshop-y portion of this event. And we're going to do a little, do we want to jump into the role play right now, Courtney?
I think we were thinking of maybe just going through the script as a group before we do that.
Great.
And I just dropped it in the chat. Oh, I just sent it privately to Sam.
So Courtney right now is sending out a link to a Google Doc. It's sent in the chat. So everyone, if you could copy that and just paste it in your browser and just have that open. We're gonna just really quickly, Courtney is gonna run through that script, and then we're gonna break out into breakout groups and do a little activity in a minute here with that.
Great. I'll wait a couple of seconds while everyone pulls it up and just give some background information on this script. This script has basically, it's just leading people to our petition and giving a little bit of background on the sale. And then it's also telling people if they want to know more to go to the Cascadia website. And the script is based off that. It's really simple. It's really easy to follow. Also, if you don't like reading from a script, there's a bottom portion that has just the main points to make sure that you include. And so if you just want to use those bullet points, you're more than welcome to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and start just really quickly. So basically you're going to call and you say, hello, is this their name in Springfield? And then if they say no, you're going to say, okay, goodbye. And then if they say yes, you're going to introduce yourself and say, I'm working with Cascadia Wildlands and Climate Justice League to inform residents of Springfield about the Thurston Hills or Pedal Power clear-cut logging proposal. And then you're going to ask them, have you heard of this logging project? If they have not, then you're going to give this little excerpt background. I won't read it now, but we're going to be reading it out loud in our groups. But this little paragraph right here is the meat. This is what we say, and it's really good to just like know what's in there. And at the very end, it asks people if they're willing to sign the petition, and then there's a yes and a no. And then if they have already heard about the project, which is really important to know that this project existed last year, it was defeated, and now it's been reintroduced. And that's a little bit of a catch. So you just need to make sure that's clear and say it's been reintroduced, and now we just need to defeat it once again. And so here is how to sign the petition to fight against it once again.
Awesome.
And then we also have a voicemail script included that's up there on the slides. And yeah, that's it. One thing to note is make sure that you spell out Cass Wild, spell out CASC wild.org/Thurston Hills Timber Sale, but just spell out the first part. Okay, that's all.
That was great. Super, super helpful. There's nothing like a script to be just giving us exactly what we need to do this. So I think for time's sake, we should get into these working groups. Let's go to the next slide though really quick, because we're going to do a little first thing we're going to do in our working group. So we're going to use this breakout group feature. Hopefully everyone has this Google Doc open with the script so that you can see it, because you'll need it during this piece. But we're gonna, first thing you're gonna do is in your working groups, which should have about 3 or 4 folks, you're gonna have one point person. So it'll be one of the folks who is volunteering with Cascadia or Climate Justice League, and we'll just practice running through the script. So we like to talk about how our tongue is a muscle, and its muscle memory is built in also in practicing what we say. So we have to practice exactly the words over and over again. So we're going to practice going through the script and doing a phone bank role playing. But also, I'm hoping that each of your working groups can just have a discussion about some of these frequently asked questions. So you can just pop them all up at the same time, Dylan, might as well. These are just some things I think a couple of Cabria touched on at the very beginning here, but there's some just other things that we typically will get asked, or things that will come up when we're phone banking or canvassing on the issue of timber sales in general, or the Thurston Hills timber sales specifically. So why does clear cutting this 100-acre parcel matter? This is pretty much a small timber sale in the scheme of things, in the scheme of these 3,000-acre sales that we normally see. What are the safety concerns associated with clear cutting near homes and communities? We heard a lot about that. Forests need to be managed. Won't this forest be highly flammable and overcrowded if not logged? What about logging jobs? And then I think the last one that didn't pop up on there yet is how will we meet our wood supply? So those were also just pasted, thank you by Courtney, those questions in the chat, because you won't be able to see the share screen when we go into the Zoom. So why don't we actually just copy these questions and paste them into the Google Doc so that everyone can see them. I'll go ahead and do that right now. I'll paste them at the bottom of the Google Doc so that everyone can see those as we go in. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Courtney. Okay, so I'm going to split us into breakout groups. We're going to have about 15 minutes or probably less. We're going to have like 12 minutes to have some discussions. Be patient with me. One thing you will need to do is accept the invitation to join the working group, or you're just going to be in purgatory. So just look for that in a second here. Now I'm going to make it happen.
Hey, Sam, I'm on phone. Do you have any idea if I'm going to be able to do breakout groups?
Yes, you will, and it should work just exactly in the same way. So here we go. You should be getting an invitation to join now.
Didn't get an invite.
Oh, weird. I'm gonna move you to a room that needs someone. Did it work? Can you join it?
Oh, maybe